Hello and welcome to a new episode of Connecting Ports, the platform where we focus on critical issues shaping the global port industry. It's great to have you all with us today. I'm Christina Prieser, Associate Partner and Transport Economist at HPC, and I'm excited to guide today's discussion on how automation, digitalization and sustainability are transforming daily operations, redefining tasks and reshaping workforce dynamics across the industry. As always, our motto is debating what matters and your input counts. So please share your thoughts, ask questions or challenge what you hear today in the chat. So we will bring as much as possible into this discussion. Today, we want to highlight how the port industry can balance progress and change in the field of automation, digitalization and sustainability, with a special view to the situation of the port workers in this transition. Any transformation process offers new opportunities, and we will look at how we can bridge gaps between current and future needs. Before we dive in, let's meet the experts shaping today's discussions. Each of them brings valuable insights. So first, let us welcome Ariane Colson in London, the Knowledge Manager for Ports and Shipping at C40 Cities, a global network of 100 world leading cities driving climate action. Ariane will share insights on how ports and cities can support a just and inclusive transition to greener jobs. Welcome. Next, we are happy to introduce Berardina Tommasi, Policy Officer for Dockers at the European Transport Workers Federation in Brussels. She plays a key role in shaping policies that protect and advance the rights of dockers, terminal workers and port employees across Europe with a view to impacts of new technologies on the workforce. Welcome, Berardina. Then let's welcome Miguel Montesinos, CEO of Prodevelop in Valencia. He has more than 30 years of experience in implementing digitalization projects in ports, such as port management and port community systems, and he will highlight how new technologies are transforming daily operations and workforce dynamic. Hi, Miguel. And
Hi.
Last but not least, we welcome Guenter Schmidmeir from Munich. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at FERNRIDE, a leader in human-assisted autonomy for transport. With a strong background in terminal operations automation, he brings valuable expertise to our discussion on how automation is shaping the future of port work. So, hi, Guenter.
Hello, thank you very much.
Thanks to all our speakers for being here today. And with such varied expertise, we are set now to explore our topic from multiple perspectives. So let's dive in and start our discussion with you, Ariane. Your just published study, Shaping the Future of Maritime Workforce, Green Jobs in Ports and Cities, is the first ever effort to map the landside view of green jobs in ports. Based on your findings, what does this evolving job market look like, and where do you see the biggest trends and gaps?
Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation today as well. So maybe to set the context, the shipping industry is at a critical juncture. The sector accounts for 3% of global CO2 emissions today, but this figure could rise to 17% by 2050 if the industry is left unregulated. So this speaks to urgent decarbonization and climate action needed to meet our climate targets at different levels, whether that's global, regional, or local. And the transition to greener port practices really opens opportunities to reduce emissions, create jobs, have cleaner air, and build resilient communities. But the key question is, how do we ensure that the transition works for workers, is fair, inclusive, creates decent work, and leaves no one behind? So in other words, how do we ensure that this transition is a just transition? As you say, C40 has mapped for the first time the landside workforce of that transition, and I want to share some key research insights with you today. The Global Maritime Forum estimates that shipping decarbonization could create up to 4 million jobs by 2030, especially in the Global South. The GMF also anticipates a 400% increase in demand for green jobs in maritime by 2030. So that means there is a real big interest in green jobs and green skills. Yet, we also have found that there was a real skills gap, especially in science, technology, engineering, and math skills, otherwise called STEM fields, which we know are crucial for renewable energy and low carbon fuels. The majority of current workers' skills, so workers that are currently working in fossil fuel-based industries, align with green activities. This means that their jobs can be safeguarded through reskilling and active labor policies. For example, the Port of Seattle has set a green jobs program through which it collaborates with the city on the regional green job strategy. The plan is to support skills development in low carbon fuel technologies. The port also partners with local colleges to make sure that youth are attracted to maritime careers and receive the appropriate training before starting their professional journey. Before I wrap up, I want to point to two other challenges that our research points out. The first one is a diversity gap in the industry, with gender, racial, and ethnic minorities underrepresented in the workforce, especially in higher paid and higher skilled positions. Secondly, we know that some regions still have very high informal employment, and this calls for targeted protections to prevent workers from being left behind. In order to tackle all of this, our research really shows the opportunity for multi-stakeholder collaborations at different levels of governance, by which I mean city authorities, port authorities, as well as national government, regional bodies, energy utilities, etc. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ariane. And you have highlighted how the transition to greener operations influences the workers. So now let's bring in the automation perspective. And Guenter, automation is often felt as means to replace workers by technology. But can we reframe the conversation, and because the reality is more complex? What do you think is the most overlooked aspect of how automation is reshaping work in ports?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thanks for inviting us to be on the panel here. Looking at that and into the past for all the automation projects that I had the chance to participate in the ports, is obviously that what we're doing is a human-assisted approach where all the points that Ariane mentioned follow really suit, that we have an approach at FERNRIDE where we say it cannot be an automation per se, it is an human-assisted autonomous approach. And if you have a look here, what we're doing is we're having driverless systems to close that gap of horizontal transportation. However, this addresses the parts of upskilling. So you don't see a driver here, but what we do have is we have a remote controlled operation. So we taken out a person of within a truck and move that workspace. We upskill that job, move that workspace into an office where you can have a much safer environment, where you can have the diversity aspect, which was very difficult in many different countries. You can also have people being employed that have a, let's say, physical limitation. So all this is possible with this approach. And at the same time, it's an absolute upskilling. And that I have seen in many, many different areas. We're not taking away jobs. We're creating jobs of different caliber. We're having existing jobs and We're addressing situations where there is shortages in areas that you can increase productivity. So if you have a person that you can remove from an unsafe environment, a very dangerous environment where there is accident prone, and we unfortunately have a lot of fatal accidents every day in this world on container terminals, and move that workplace through human assisted autonomy into an office, that is a great achievement. Another point to address Ariane's goals there is that I have seen also a lot of times that the path towards automation is very, very close to electrification. And this is one approach in container terminals that you always have to look at, that with this automation or automating certain processes, electrification goes along, there is more reliability, and there is less carbon emissions that are resulting out of that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Guenter. And so you just explained how automation integrates human expertise. But from the dock workers' perspective, is this truly the reality, or are workers being pushed out of the industry? So, Berardina, there have been massive protests against automation, particularly in the ports of the United States East Coast, and the media often portray automation as a direct threat to port workers. But when we look beyond the headlines, how do you see the situation? Are new technologies such as automation or artificial intelligence fundamentally reshaping dock work, or is the fear of job losses sometimes overstated?
Thank you, Christina. Thanks for the invitation, and good afternoon to everybody. Well, difficult to give a complete answer to this, but I will start by saying that, of course, from the dock workers' perspective, the reality of automation is different. Automation is often presented as a way to enhance efficiency, integrate human expertise, but in many cases, it has led and it's leading to significant job losses, increased job insecurity, and basically a fundamental shift in the nature of dock work. The European Transport Workers Federation has consistently raised concerns about how automation is implemented, because the introduction of, for example, automated cranes, vehicles, remote-controlled equipment has reduced the need for traditional manual labor. This is a fact. And while this shift does create some new specialized positions, this, of course, we cannot deny, these jobs are often fewer in number and require different skill sets, leading to a kind of a mismatch between existing workers and new job demands. I think that a key issue is that automation is frequently introduced with cost-cutting as the primary goal, rather than as a way to improve working conditions or workers' well-being. Port operators often claim that automation allows for a safer, more efficient workplace, which sometimes it's true, but we notice that the human cost is frequently overlooked. In the port of Rotterdam, for instance, which is the largest in Europe and also the only one that is fully automated, we saw a loss of 300 jobs between 2000 and 2024 due to increased automation. And even earlier, because automation in Rotterdam started more than 30 years ago, between 1989 and 2000, automation resulted in the loss of 1,200 jobs. So I think that this illustrates quite well that the impact of automation is not just a theoretical concern for us, it's a reality that affects the workers and their lives. So, as you can understand, these are led to situations where the workers feel increasingly marginalized, with fewer job opportunities and less influence over all the changes that are going on in their own workplaces. And I think I can say our message is quite clear on this. Automation should not be imposed without workers' consultation. It must be accompanied by a fair transition measures that can be set in collective agreements, early retirement schemes, retraining, job guarantees, even if possible, when possible, shift to part-time jobs, why not? And to reply to your second question, briefly, since we also mentioned all the protests going on in the US, East Coast, in Los Angeles. Let's take two ports that are fully automated, like Rotterdam in Europe and then Los Angeles in the US. These facilities required far fewer workers than traditional ports. And this, I think, raises a fundamental question. Are we witnessing job transformation, or are we simply cutting jobs and replacing them with machines? I think that the outcome relies a bit on the way we answer to this question and the way, basically, automation is implemented. So if ports are able to integrate new technology while investing in workforce training, then automation can also create job opportunities for workers to shift into new roles. However, if automation is purely a cost-saving measure, then we will lose jobs, and this cannot be avoided. Thanks.
Thank you, Berardina, for your views. And I see that Guenter would like to say something, but just a little bit, we postpone it a bit, okay? So let's give Miguel a chance first. So we have talked about automation, impact on workers. Now we focus a bit more on the digitalization perspective. And we ask ourselves, does automation actually enhance human expertise, or does it just make life easier for employers while workers struggle to adapt? And so, Miguel, you've spent a long time driving digitalization in the port sector. How does digitalization enhance human expertise and create new roles rather than replacing them? Can you share some examples, please?
Yes. Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel and to share experiences with you. I would say that digitalization enhances human expertise for sure. As Guenter was saying, the purpose is to augment human capabilities and to assist them to do their job easier and to make better decisions rather than replacing some jobs. I know that there will be some shift between some traditional works and new ones. But there's something that happens with the evolution of humankind. There's a shift from some works to new ones. There will be emergence of new tech-driven roles. For instance, digitalization projects leads to roles such as AI specialists, data analysts, cybersecurity experts, automation engineers, digital process managers, some other roles which usually are more appealing to younger professionals seeking innovation-driven careers rather than older ones, but are new positions that are needed, that we are lacking those types of roles for the industry to develop. There will be some shift. For instance, the way that the ports were managed 50 years ago is not the same than 20 years ago, is not the same than right now. And it will be changing in the future. The challenge is that those without the knowledge of digital technologies, like for instance AI, which is quite trendy in the recent years, will lack opportunities. The workers without those knowledge will be in worse situations with respect to other people. To address this, training is a must. And I would say that it's not a question of just specific training initiatives. With the speed of digital evolution, this means lifelong learning. There will be also some flexible and remote work opportunities, which makes everything more appealing to young workers, like remote working, remote controlling, hybrid work models, which improve work-life balance, increase retention because there's mobility of skilled people between this industry and other ones. This is not just a silo. I would finally say that the World Economic Forum emphasizes that digitalization fosters a culture of lifelong learning, and this means training, micro-learning platforms, certification programs to make jobs much more engaging and future-proof. So this is a path. We are going through it. It's not a static situation, and we must adapt and be able to evolve, taking into account the needs of workers and their progression through their life.
Thanks a lot, Miguel. And I saw the other speakers nodding here when you mentioned training. So I think there is general agreement on that as a major aspect. Before we come to that, let's zoom in on the challenges that the shift to greener port operations brings, not just for workers adapting to new roles, but also for the employers managing workforce transformation. So, Ariane, what are the biggest risks and challenges different stakeholders face in this workforce transition? So what are pressures to employers experience, and how are workers affected?
Thank you. Thanks again. Well, I think, again, to set the context, I would definitely say that a first challenge relates to the ecosystem, maybe even more than what workers experience or employers experience. The first one is that shipping decarbonization is not only about technology, but also about people. And the fact that C40's research was the first of its kind speaks to lack of research and insufficient conversations on how to prepare the workforce for those green jobs that should also be decent jobs. So a first challenge for me would be lack of conversation about planning the just transition in ports and shipping. A second challenge that I would point is we anticipate a staffing crisis when it comes to those green careers. There is growing demand for green skills, but the workforce is not yet prepared because there's insufficient planning. And this shortage of skills and therefore skilled workers may hinder and potentially delay the urgent climate action that we need right now to combat the climate crisis. And finally, I want to highlight some of the challenges and concerns that have been raised already by other panelists and that the workforce experiences itself. The first one is on automation. Our research is pointing to different directions when it comes to the impact of automation. Depending on location, we see that there could be some job losses. Other times it could be some job creation, but it doesn't mean that the jobs lost are for the same people than the new jobs. So definitely conversations around the impact of automation, and this needs to be localized. A second point which was just highlighted is digitalization and the impacts on skills and jobs. And finally, a last trend is job relocation. So here again, it's about looking at the jobs, but beyond the net numbers. It's looking at jobs that are created versus jobs that are lost and seeing whether this affects the same people and benefits the same people. And in shipping decarbonization, it's not always the people that lose their jobs that will benefit from the newly created jobs. So here I really want to point to two things to wrap up. Is the International Labour Organization says that 70% of affected jobs in transitions can be saved through retraining and targeted retraining and labour policies. That really speaks to the fact that we need to plan and identify which are the impacts of this transition on workers and make sure to mitigate those impacts to leave no one behind. And then a final second point would be, it really is important to look at those impacts on a case-by-case basis, to understand the specific location and the challenges related to that specific port, for example. And so here, to go back to the Port of Rotterdam, Rotterdam School of Management is researching currently how automation will impact the workforce. And the aim is to prevent job displacement. And the research really shows that the outcomes of automation are sometimes a lot more political than they're technological purely. And researchers will provide a set of recommendations to influence policy making at the port and the city to make sure that workers and the impact of automation on workers are addressed in a way that is inclusive and fair. So in short, Just Transition is about identifying the challenges and making sure that they are outlined in a way that is very local and with a granular understanding of what is happening on the ground, and mitigate the negative impacts. C40 has looked into a few cases of unjust transitions, so where social dialogue would not be upheld or communities would not be engaged, for example. And this shows that this leads to economic and social disruptions, strikes, etc., and higher inequalities. And this all slows down climate action, which is something that we absolutely want to prevent. So Just Transition is essential if we are to stay on track and on course for our climate objectives. Thank you.
Thanks, Ariane. And taking up what you and the others had said, Guenter, based on your operations experience, what is your idea? What is the reality of automation in ports, and how are human expertise and technology gradually integrated?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, just one clarification. There's obviously more than one fully automated terminal in Europe. It depends on what we consider fully automated. So I have worked on many projects in London Gateway, in Belgium. Of course, CTA in Hamburg is a fully automated terminal, right? But to address the specific question, I think it's a complete misconception to say automation comes in and takes away jobs. So let's divide that first. If we have greenfield projects where a new port, a new container terminal is being built, that generates a tremendous amount of new workspaces, and you need all the information, the work, the experience to build such an automated terminal. And I can say, if you say, okay, let's build this, and at the moment we're not facing any new build automation project. So, but that is just to separate that a little bit in saying fully automation doesn't take away jobs at all. It creates a lot of jobs as well, of a different category in that sense. But now with the gradual approach, and this is especially what we're doing at FERNRIDE, we're coming in and we're addressing issues where there is shortage of labor. And we're talking here in specifics. You have to be competitive as a terminal operator. You have to run 3 shifts, 364 days out of the year. One example, I was in Japan and I met the head of the union who said our society is completely aging. There is absolutely no way we need this kind of approach of automation to even keep up anything. That was the head of the union that asked for that request. So there is a approach that we can say exactly what you said, Berardina. We have to train the people. We create jobs that are upskilled. And that's what we're doing at FERNRIDE, to say if we can introduce a gradual automation for, let's say, these baseline tedious jobs of this shift work where trucks have to be driven from A to B, and I say it again, in an extremely dangerous environment. There is terminals in Western Europe where there is more than 20 fatalities per year on one terminal alone, right? And if we take these workers and we upskill their job and we bring them into an office, and they can then operate, instead of one truck, multiple trucks. They can operate 2 trucks. We increase the efficiency, we can keep up the productivity and still have people in place that do that job. So I think that this whole thing like automation kills jobs is really the wrong information. And out of my experience, I can say there is, on top of this if we look at how many jobs have been created versus how many jobs have fallen away, we also need to look at the larger ecosystem. What additional jobs have been created around that? Where did the consulting grow out of implementing automation or doing certain things? And as a society, we need to put this into consideration, and only these projects that will allow us to advance. To keep status quo, we would be taking horses and pulling cargo in and out of ports. That cannot be the future. So this is the statement here. I 100% understand that fear, but with an approach of FERNRIDE to say we have autonomous that is human assisted, where human is in control of the very last action. Human does the extraordinary, the out of the regular, that I would never call a job killer, not at all. And so we have done a report together with Hamburg Port Consulting. And one of the big concerns of port operators was to say that the resistance against automation is hindering progress. And I think that is really an important thing to say. How do we move forward with the right engagement and the right knowledge to drive this forward? And my big wish there is that out of the port industry can also come great innovations and great steps forward for a larger logistics environment, because there the lack of drivers is in the 100,000s in the coming years, and we will not be able to have our goods whenever we want them at our houses in a sustainable way. That's impossible if we don't introduce technologies like we provide them. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Guenter. And before we proceed, let me check for questions from the audience. And there are actually a couple. First to Berardina. Quick answer, was anyone fired in Rotterdam, or are there just less workplaces after a specific period of time?
Thanks for the question. Then I will get back to what Guenter said. Regarding Rotterdam, it has been a long process. So thanks to the work done by the union, they managed to get to agreements, for example, on early retirement that accompanied somehow the workers out of the jobs. But there have been also, I cannot give you numbers, but they have been layoffs, and that's why I keep saying collective bargaining is the strongest and most powerful tool that the unions have, together with the employers, when we can use it to make sure at least that this transition is just and fair, as Ariane said. It's very difficult to agree with the statement that automation is not stealing jobs. Automation is the replacement of human beings with machines. Then, if you tell me that other people, so human beings, will supervise the work of the machines, I can agree. But the job profiles are already changing, will be changing in the future, and it will be, and is being, and it has been a replacement of human beings with machines.
Thank you, Berardina. And there's another follow-up question, kind of. So, do you also have some positive examples for ports where which became job creators through automation, or is your experience, from your experience, it is only negative?
Still for me?
Yep, sure.
Yeah. I can give you a general example, because we talked, Guenter mentioned safety rightly, because I want to make clear that it's not that we are objecting automation per se, we are refusing, because it would be a very short-sighted kind of, looking at the future. Of course, new technologies are there, will be there, but we will need to exert some kind of governance. That's it. So in terms of safety, for instance, I can say that some of the operations that were previously done manually, now with the introduction of automated machines, can ensure a higher level of safety. This is a general example. Even if we don't want to talk about automation, but digitalization, it's still the case. The point is that then there will be other issues related to safety in the workplace for the workers, because then we will have people, dock workers, used to work outside, working in front of a screen and managing I don't know how many cranes at the same time. So there is always like a double side, even about safety. But if we want to find pros, then I can mention these. I can also mention somehow what Miguel anticipated before, that this kind of new skills probably will attract more young people, more women if we want, because they will not be in the conditions of working in a very physically demanding job. So these can be the advantages or the good points that I can mention about automation.
Thank you very much, Berardina. And before we come to further questions from the audience, I'd like to proceed here, going back to Miguel and digitalization, which is transforming how ports operate at a lot of levels. So what are the largest barriers to implementing digital solutions in ports, and how can ports ensure workers don't just keep up, but actually benefit from digitalization?
Okay, good question. I would say that there are several barriers we face when we have to put in place digital solutions. One is what Berardina was just describing. The automation optimization will remove job positions. I might say that they think that some jobs may be at risk. I think that I partially agree with you, Berardina, but I would say that automation is not only replacing, it's also being able to do more with the same resources. For instance, I remember 30 years ago, there was a continuous travel of shipping guys, I would say that way, riders, taking documentation from their ship agent's office to the Port Authority office. Then the EDI was introduced, and surprisingly, all those guys were not needed. But with this new way of doing electronic interchange of information, the port were able to grow a lot, to pass from just a few thousand containers to the amazing figures we see nowadays. It happens the same in the container terminals. They are growing. They need the world commerce grows, and they need to do more with the same resources. That doesn't mean that they are going to remove job positions. They want to do more with the same people. That's one of the aspects of automation that helps to do that. And one of the barriers we usually face is I wasn't taken into account. This is a big misconcept or a big failure in project because when people are not involved from the very beginning, then they find that there are procedural, legal, business aspects that has not been properly addressed. And so the end users tend to say, I like not to use it, and if possible, I won't use it. For example, I saw a lot of years ago when mobile devices were not usual, a huge investment made by the Port Authority to give Port Police kind of mobile devices. which were much more expensive than nowadays laptops. And finally, they weren't used because it wasn't included in the workers' regulatory agreement. So the unions refused to do that. Another example would be a new terminal operating systems, where it was expected some people to move from the yard to the control room. But the unions were not taken into account from the very beginning, and they refused to do that. Even it was against their own safety, but they refused, and they forced the project to stop. So I would say that one very important overcome is to take into account the end users from the very beginning. But I'm not meaning a user from a company, I mean the real end users, because the managers know some things, but they are not in the field. So we need to take into account the real end users from the very beginning. Another barrier we face is that they feel that they are complicated tools. We think that we are providing them a kind of wheel when you are in the Stone Age and you provide a wheel for carrying goods, and they see that as rocket science. So it's hard for them. So there's a lot of things to do in terms of change management, training, and one very important thing is the usability, the user experience. It's not only we are replacing this with this tool. It's important to study the user experience, usability, so that everything can be changed, accompanying the user and the way they do and the new way to do things. One of a good tool for this is a service that our friends from HPC provide, which they call Health Check, which is just after the rollout of a system, they engage with the people to detect problems, issues, or they are not using the tools properly, and then they provide a consultancy service to give instructions about the evolution, adaptation, so that the system is not just drop and everyone moves away. The system needs to be adapted to the real needs of the people, and the people need extra training, extra support for putting things in place. I would say a lot of things, but we're a lot of time, so I think that's enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Let's jump over to Berardina again. So some people argue that resistance to automation could make ports less attractive for investment. How does the dock workers union balance protecting jobs with ensuring ports remain competitive?
Thank you, Christina. I will stick to the time. First of all, I think that the idea that the resistance to automation makes ports less attractive for investment overlooks the reality that is much more complex in modern ports, and it's kind of misleading for two reasons. The first is that it indirectly suggests that the only way to remain competitive is to reduce labor costs, which ignores the many factors that contribute to a successful ports. Ports that are efficient, that are reliable, that are safe, are more likely to attract business. But these qualities are not only related, or not necessarily related only to automation. They rely on the skill, the experience, and the dedication also of the workers. And second reason for me, I think, is now widely recognized that automation does not always lead to higher productivity. I would like to mention a study from the International Transport Forum, OECD, from 2021 on container port automation that supports this view, basically revealing that while automation can increase the efficiency, the productivity under some ideal conditions, it often fails to achieve the expected productivity gains. I'm talking specifically about fully automated ports, and I know I agree with Guenter on the fact that we have not so many fully automated ports, thankfully. But these kind of ports, they can also encounter technical disruptions, for example. And in these cases, the human intervention becomes absolutely necessary. At the same time, with these kind of interruptions, you also have long periods in some cases where the port the terminal is kind of stuck, waiting for the problems to be fixed. And this doesn't happen in traditional ports where there is much more flexibility, and especially when problems arise, the dock workers, the human beings, react immediately and know what to do. Then I would like to mention, if I can, that we shouldn't forget that automation also demands substantial investments. I said that they don't always correspond then to the expected returns. And all this to say that in my view, there should be, first of all, a better preventive assessment of the costs, the benefits, and the impact that an automation project will bring, with the right differentiation between greenfield and brownfield, of course. One of the key ways that the unions have, talking about the union, is, I think, the collective bargaining agreement. In some European ports, unions have successfully negotiated agreements that allow for technological upgrade while securing also the jobs, with retention of job and also reskilling. So I think, in a nutshell, that investment in people is at least as important as investment in technology.
Thank you, Berardina. And I think we are not that far apart. All here participating is just kind of different angle to the discussion, I would say. I don't see any real disruptions, and I would hand over back to Guenter. Beyond the factor that it makes the operations more secure and safe, what impact does automation have on workers' satisfaction and motivation? Can you share some examples where technology has improved the working conditions?
Absolutely. So we, for example, at FERNRIDE have trained mostly former truck drivers to become teleoperators and to do teleoperations. And I can just say that through and through, the experience was fantastic, that people really see this as an upskill of work, where people say, hey, this is exciting, I'm part of developing something new, where we can bring the expertise in and still be in control at the very end with a much better work environment. There is no sitting in a cabin under any climate circumstances, where they can help define this technology, how it can be human assisted, and as Berardina said, with the human interaction if needed. But there is so many tedious and monotonous tasks that are not even desired to be done. Why do we have a workforce in that space that is even beyond my age? Absolutely. So we need to attract this kind of new work environment to attract younger people, to get people in that job. And I want to repeat, on the open road trucking, there's hundreds of thousands of jobs that cannot be filled in the next few years. But we all rely on that entire delivery process. Our entire society relies on that. So the one example is really our own drivers that have been taken from a traditional trucking job and made them into teleoperators. They're now embedded also into operational testing at different locations. They have very much embraced it. And then a second thing that Berardina was also mentioning, I have seen remote operations in the Middle East where female are in offices that was unthinkable of. No one would be climbing up a crane. So this diversity and the change there, or also physically impaired people can do this kind of job. And it's not about taking away the jobs. It's finding this right approach to have humans interact with technology. And the last I want to say there is, automation is a very wide field. If you say there is a machine that takes over a job or a robot, it's different from a process automation. And there I want to say definitely every port in Europe, every terminal, every container terminal would not be able to rely on people if their automation systems, as in planning automation, would go down. Maybe they can move for 30 minutes and then no one knows if you have 1 million containers, where is what and what should be picked. So that's a wider range of automation there. But again, have many examples where people really that have gone through, and this is now on the people whose job has been transferred, and not the ones that have been part of defining automation as in machine automation, and then have thrived in their jobs and been experts and done consulting work or been part of other big developments. So thank you.
Thanks, Guenter. Now let's move on to Miguel. How can digitalization be designed to support workers? And are there governance models or industry standards that ensure the fair access to digital tools for all stakeholders?
Good question. Thank you. I think that this is a key question because governance affects the way a digital solution is going to be successful or not. Once it's done, you need to govern the way a system is going to be operated. When talking about all port stakeholders, port community systems come at first thought. For the governance of port community systems, there are different models put in place in different places. They should be managed as neutral platform, ensuring equal access for all stakeholders. There are very different actors, terminal operators, shipping lines, customs, logistic providers, port authority, and there are different models. Usually there are some of them fostered by port authority, as happens in Rotterdam, Valencia, and so on. There are some fostered by port stakeholders, as it happens in Hamburg, which is a very good example. And there are some public-private partnership. Usually more, they take place more in Africa or in other regions. And there's also the fact that it's not only the port who is involved. We need to take into account governance with government. For instance, the National Maritime Single Windows need to address not only the port community, but the ministries, customs, and other different stakeholders. And when you try to create a governance model, you face that they follow different paces, they have different interests, and it's really complicated to have all these people aligned and going at the same pace. For instance, we made a digital platform in Algeciras for optimizing the visits of the vessel to a port, which was very successful because the vessel idling time was reduced from 3 hours to less than 2. It was really a success. And we tried to replicate the same in Mexico in another port. And it happened that, okay, it was going everything fine, but one terminal needed the approval from Korea. And it took them 1 year just to give the okay to the project. And when there's a collaboration project, you need all of the different stakeholders to be put in place, because if I have to talk to you and you cannot talk to me because your manager needs to approve in 1 year, it will be failure. So I would say that the governance model is key for the success of this type of systems. There are a lot of examples about how this can be successful, but I would like to highlight something that has been discussed, is that digitalization and automation is not only a question of performance. It is. For instance, Berardina was talking about that automated terminals are not the highest in terms of performance, It's well known that Yokohama is the high-level standard and it's completely manual. But what automated terminals offer is reliable KPIs, reliable figures, reliable numbers. That is what operators are looking for, not only to have a wonderful figure this day or this shift, but a steady way of working without dropping in shift changes, without being affected by external factors. So I think that reliability is also something that must be taken into account to measure the performance and the success of this type of projects.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Let's see how to equip the workers for the future, in which trade unions play a key role in protecting them. So let's watch a short video on this aspect first. Right, Berardina, which role should unions play in reskilling dock workers for greener and more digitalized port jobs? And actually, who should pay for these transitions? Can you give us a brief answer, please?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm of the opinion that unions must go beyond protecting jobs and also actively make efforts to prepare workers to the future. This is, from your side, this is a great example of an initiative that is focused on equipping dock workers with the right technical skills. So I think programs of these kinds are essential. Of course, a key challenge is funding, without hiding that. We think and we advocate for publicly funded training centers, company-sponsored upskilling programs, and also programs that derive, maybe that can derive from negotiated agreement. Because we think, of course, that the costs of training, of this kind of training, should not fall on the workers. Then on the other side, I'm also totally aware that, and I think that the union movement is also responsible for giving their workers the skills, the union skills that they need. So different kind of training. I'm not talking about professional training, but different kind of training in the union movement, in the union activity, are being done. The ETF has been organizing many different initiatives, roadshows, seminars about many topics, but more specifically today I want to talk about the ones on automation. So we put together workers, union members from different European countries, different backgrounds, coming from different experiences, of course, even in terms of automation, so that they could share their experiences, learn from one another. And this also worked, because it's true that training, retraining, upskilling, reskilling in the workplace is fundamental. But at the same time, I think the unions should do their job and give also the workers a perspective about the future challenges that they will face.
Thank you very much, Berardina. And dear audience, I know we are overrunning, but it's such an interesting topic, and I hope you will bear with us for a couple of more minutes. We are approaching the end, actually. But before that, I have a question to Ariane first. So how do you see the connection between clean investment opportunities and just transition principles? And what role do funding strategies play in balancing economic growth with workforce security and social equality?
Thank you. That's a really broad question, but I'll do my best. So I guess the first point I'd like to highlight here is that there is a real paradox when it comes to finance between the actors who are best positioned to implement climate action and the actors which get the most funding or finance to implement those actions. So cities and ports are not only at the front line of the climate crisis, but are also really key drivers of climate action and implement it on a daily basis and really in ways that are very ambitious. And yet they receive only very few climate funding or climate finance. So for example, cities get less than 10% of climate funds and ports face similar finance gap. And the reason why I want to point to this is there is a really big missed opportunities here to build resilient economies and equitable communities. Cities and ports deliver climate action at faster rate than national actors most often. And on top of this, they tend to be really trusted by port communities, residents, workers, just because there is at the local level higher social dialogue as well as community engagement. So to go back to the question on how do we leverage funding or finance in climate action in a way that drives just transition in ports and shipping, I guess the first thing would be to increase capital allocation to the actors that are best placed to implement action. And our research shows that governments are sensitive to the argument of green jobs creation in green ports project and tend to fund those projects in priority over others. But there is a lot less evidence pointing to this when it comes to private capital. And some of the reasons why there might be less private capital allocation is because there are no standardized definitions of green jobs, for example, no common metrics to measure green jobs. And we could also take this even forward, thinking of good green jobs. And so the decency of the jobs that you are looking at, are they high pay rate? Are they high paid? Are they linked to social protections? Is there great diversity among the workforce? And so here I just want to point to a few things that I guess would be good to think when we connect just transition and money. It would be to invest in projects that not only reduce emissions, but also create those local green jobs and prioritize creation of local good green jobs, and projects that involve trade unions, workers, port communities, and residents along the way. And I'll just wrap up saying that we really need to allocate a lot more capital to actors that are also subnational actors, such as city governments and port authorities, to unlock the full potential that they have.
Thank you, Ariane. And as we are now near the end of our show, we have seen in our discussion that it's not just about technology, it's about people very much who will shape and be shaped by that technology. And in order to wrap up our discussions here today, I would like to hear a 1-minute answer from each of our participants. So if you could envision the ideal working environment in the ports of the future, what would it look like, and what key adjustments need to be made to create a development framework that ensures both efficiency and fairness? So let's start with Guenter.
Thank you. 1 minute is ticking. So Of course, I think we have to have a openness and a approach of collaboration. So with our approach to say we upskill workers, we take truck drivers and teach them how to do this remotely and increase their efficiency. That is like the right approach to get towards this understanding of we cannot remain on the status quo, because otherwise we would have never seen the horseless carriage. And I say that again, we cannot insist on protecting everything as it is without going forward and saying we have these technologies, because there is different versions or different grades of automation. So I would like to have this collaboration and see an environment where we can grow. And now the ideal view of this would be that ports and terminals have not been technology innovators for a very, very long time for various reasons. But now in our field, this is one area where even from that area, something bigger could come out. And how does that have to change? I think we're on a very good path. We have training centers ourselves. We help people understand that we're not killing jobs, that we're making this better and increase all the positive sides towards it. So if I have this ask for change, I would just say if the industry in general can standardize, be open-minded, and say going forward with a approach to use technology that is the right way, that would be ideal for me. Thank you. That was less than a minute.
Thank you very much, Guenter. Much appreciated. And Miguel, would you like to continue?
Yes, I'll try to be brief. I would add to all that Guenter has said that ports need to put in place kind of bodies for making people to collaborate and innovate. It can be in form of innovation committees or things like that, where everyone in the community can take their place. We usually tend to think in specific users, in specific workers, for instance, stevedores, but there are a lot of different people working in a port. Each of them has its own interest. There are pilots, there are moorers, there are tugboats, there are port police, there are a lot of different people. You need to put all those people in the same place to be able to collaborate among them and to innovate. And this should be enforced by port authorities, who has the role to do this. So I would say just try to keep these bodies, wherever you can call them, in place with private companies, port operators, all the different companies to work in the same place, because that way you will understand better the problems of each other and you will arrive to better solutions. I would say that.
Thank
1
you.
minute more or less.
Thank you, Miguel. So now let's move over to Ariane.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to highlight 3 priorities. So the first one, as I was mentioning before, would really be to enhance the conversations on just transition for the landside workforce in ports and shipping. And by this, I mean not only focusing on workforce development and skills, but also aspects such as decent work, social dialogue, and community engagement. A second point would be to resource the actors that are implementers sufficiently to unlock their full potential. And here I'm thinking of subnational actors, city governments, port authorities. They have tremendous powers. They have the trust of port communities, and we really need to make sure they have the adequate resources to be able to scale up what they are already doing. And final point would be to also extend the conversation on just transition to a global level beyond considerations very locally. We need to think of global North and global South equity. The global South will have opportunities to contribute in shipping decarbonization in many ways through sustainable fuels, renewable energy production. And we really need to make sure we move away from extractive practices that are related to the fossil fuel industry and make sure that the approach that we take at a global level is equitable.
Thank you very much, Ariane. And now, Berardina, let's have your ideas.
Thanks. Very briefly, I think that the ideal port for the future is a port where investments in automation are matched with investments in people. So the main adjustments that are needed, or the areas where we will need more efforts for me, are a fair transition framework where workers can be participants, can shape the technological change and feel as they are part of the process. Strong collective agreements, because the workers through the unions should have a voice in the decisions taken about introducing automation and new technologies in general. Socially sustainable investment and workers' development through training, skilling, upskilling, and reskilling. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all of you for those inspiring views. So it's clear that driving the transition in port work, whether through automation, digitalization, or sustainability, takes it all: strategic vision, hands-on action, and strong collaboration between these different stakeholders. I think we all agree on that. So big thank you to our speakers, Ariane Colson, Berardina Tommasi, Miguel Montesinos, and Guenter Schmidmeir, for sharing your insights and expertise today. And of course, thank you very much to our audience for your engagement, contributions, and for staying with us. And I have a number of questions here in the chat. Unfortunately, time's running out, but we try to come back to you on this and give them to our speakers. So we hope today's discussion has sparked ideas and perspectives for your work. And as usual, the session has been recorded and will be made available shortly on our HPC YouTube channel. So please stay tuned for updates on our next Connecting Ports in July. And until then, take care, goodbye, and tschüss from Hamburg.